When you first start woodworking, you try to figure out just about anything. So when a customer reached out asking if I'd be willing to make one of these, I responded, sure. What is it? Some people refer to these as wood discs, wood cookies, or slices. I don't know what you would call it, but today I'd like to show you how I made it. As I mentioned, these things come with different names. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to refer to them as wood cookies because that's how I first heard about them. I'm going through these and I'm trying to find the ones that are the most flat. The reason why is because when this project is all said and done, I do want the piece itself to have a certain amount of thickness about it. In order to make sure that I get it completely flat, I took a flat piece of MDF, make sure if there was any wobble in this that I tried to identify the high side from the bottom, which is what you see there. And I just went through all these little scrap pieces and tried to see which one fit until I found the perfect one. And in any wood project, if you have to flatten a piece and you're going with this method, take your time or you'll likely regret it. I would encourage you not to glue the propping piece directly to your project because it's just a little bit more trouble to try to get that off of there. And you could put tape on the actual project and then on the prop, glue those together, and I promise you it sticks just as well. You won't be disappointed. After doing this, the next step was taking it over to the drum sander. And I'll give you a heads up, there's some burning that happens on the drum sander and some notes that I leave behind for you just in case you ever have one of those to help you work a little bit easier with the drum sander. Whenever I see this burning, it's usually because of one of two reasons. Either the sandpaper is coming off the roller and it's time to be changed, or I'm just taking it too slow on the drum sander and I need to speed it up. So that's what I did. Once I got my time adjusted, I sent this through probably another 30 times or so to get the top side flat. And remember, what is allowing me to get that top side flat is the fact that I have a prop underneath. Once I finally got the top of it flat, I could now turn that over, use that as my flat reference, take the prop off, and then flatten the underside. Now here's a quick tip. Look for the steam on this after I spray it. Running it through the drum sander does make it hot, and making it hot kind of makes the wood curl up a little bit. So you can go through all this work of trying to flatten these pieces to no avail for it just to curl up on you. Speaking of curls, I paused from doing those for the day and I use my dumbbells to keep these flat. I go through this process for a few hours and I flatten a few of these pieces, and then I go through and I pick out which one I want to use for our customer. You'll see that I ended up grabbing a couple more of those and doing 2 other clocks along with this process, but that one that I left behind, that's our lucky winner today. Now when it came to designing this piece, my method of madness was to try to follow the grains as much as possible, but also get rid of the crack that was in it. That said, I do like to keep what's natural to the piece, so I guess you can say I refined it. After cutting that crack out, I took the surrounding pieces that were left and then placed it back in the board and made that my design. Now when it comes to doing epoxy, you want to take your time. What I'm doing here is I'm laying a bead of silicone down because I'm going to do an initial pour, and epoxy runs. If it can find a way out, it's going to get out. So what that bead is going to allow me to do is to keep the epoxy in on my initial pour, and then I can come back with a couple deeper pours and not be concerned about those pours running and me essentially losing a bunch of money.
Okay, so this is really good. The epoxy actually held, and I didn't show you, but I'll show you now. These pieces are in there really firm. So it did its job. That's really good. If that bottom board sticks to it, it's about 1/4 of an inch thick. It's soft wood. I can just sand it down. It's not that big of a deal. But really the next step now is trying to figure out how to create a dam or a blockage so that I can pour the epoxy down in here, make the river, if you will, and then not seep out. Now you might just think, why not wrap tape all the way around the board? Well, because this board is such an awkward shape, you do kind of have to wrap tape on the edges here. But the downside of that is that this board actually has really cool grain patterns on the side of it. And if you put strong enough tape here to hold in the epoxy, then that tape has to be sanded off. And consequently, I end up sanding off the tape and the grain. So I need to figure out a way to do that, to block the epoxy, keep it in there, but not lose that natural grain pattern. If you have a way, you're already thinking about it, put it down in the comments, let me know. Maybe I'll figure it out by the end of this video, but honestly, at this point, I don't know what I'm gonna do.
And we're going to call this section the DIYer, trying to think on camera. It's a long name, but it's appropriate. I don't get this figured out, people. Spoiler alert.
I think I know what I'm gonna do.
Except I actually don't. And that's made pretty evident by this coming face.
This flex glue.
Boom. There it is, in the eyes. I have no idea how to create that dam. Ultimately, I end up using tape, but I tried diligently. I even tried to explain it while I was on camera as if it made sense what I was doing, but it didn't make any sense. And I paid the price, but I learned.
Listen, you ever know that friend that tries to help a situation, but then they end up just making it worse? I think I'm that friend that just made it worse. I don't know if that's gonna work or not, but we'll find out. I'm gonna let that stuff dry and I'll come back to it, see what happens. Plan B.
There's a pretty good chance that from this point on you might wonder what just happened. Not to worry, I was just removing the board underneath the project so that I could continue on with an idea that probably makes a little bit more sense, like using tape. And I'll admit, this felt like a little bit of a defeat. I couldn't figure out my idea, but I'd rather this be done right. And what I'm trying to do now is just make sure that I have every nook and cranny covered so that when I pour the large epoxy, which I'm about to do, that it doesn't seep out. And you'd be happy to know that it was pretty successful.
While that is drying up, and since I don't want to use the rest of this blue epoxy in this board because I don't want there to be a negative reaction, it is time for today's side project. So I had this idea.
There is no passion to be found playing small.
It's kind of intimidating.
All right, so I had a couple of friends at work that I actually used to work with. I just changed jobs and I wanted to say thank you to who they were to me. And I asked one of them specifically for each member in their household's favorite color. And I thought what I could do with a lot of the scrap wood that I have laying around was make them some coasters. So I'm gonna use the rest of that blue epoxy to make a couple of coasters, maybe just one at a time. And here's the reason why. So I had these little silicone wraps for the epoxy coasters, but as you can see, if I put this wood in here, these silicone wraps will allow for these coasters to be about 1/4 of an inch. And this wood is easily a 1/2 inch. And one, I don't want to waste all that wood, and two, I think it'd be kind of nice to have some thicker coasters rather than just these little skinny ones. The skinny ones are fine, but if you could make them thicker, why not, right? Better quality. So I have one of these honking 3/4 inch coaster trays, and I'm gonna put this 1/2 inch wood in here, and I'm gonna make one coaster at a time. But today I'm going to use that blue epoxy to make this one. I think they requested 2, maybe 3 blue ones, but I can make one at a time. So today's side project, epoxy coasters. You'll see this at the end of the video.
Let me show you
So
something.
I had this idea.
There is no passion to be found playing small. It's kind of intimidating.
All right, like I said, I will show you those epoxy coasters at the end of the video. There's another one that I'm doing, and the reason why is because I actually did this project in 2 different pours. I'm using tabletop epoxy, and if you pour that too thick, it can have a really bad reaction. I'll go even further to say epoxy is not one size fits all. Make sure to do your research if you're going to use any kind of epoxy. All right, now here comes the sanding, and even though I took this through the drum sander, which is at 220 grit, I still hit this first with 60 grit and worked my way up. And this was the section I was trying to be really careful on so I didn't take any of that bark pattern off, and it ended up okay.
All right, so my phone apparently died while I was sanding, but I'm gonna spritz this again. All right, because this is looking super cool. I gotta head out. The boys and I are gonna go to a Husker game. We're gonna let this dry. I'll come back. We'll sand it again. We'll get our holes drilled for the clock mechanism, and then put the finish on it, get the clock mechanism installed, and it'll be ready for our customer. And hello again. This is dry. I'm gonna go ahead and sand it down one last time at 120, and then hit it with a 220. And then after that, get everything cut out for the clock.
So what you just saw me do there is draw that circle, because drawing a circle helps identify where the middle of the clock should be. And then I took these clock backings to try to size them based on the thickness of the piece. I identified the drill bit that I needed, and I got the hole drilled. Now, in order to get that backing on there exactly where it's supposed to be, I had to build a little bit of a jig here. And again, I used that CA glue and accelerator to hold that jig in place as I was bumping the router up against the side. So just making the point again that that works really well.
Goes in here. And it goes right in there. Absolutely perfect fit. That is awesome.
Now that I got that figured out, I just duplicated the process and put it on our actual project. And then it was time to do the finish. Regarding finish, I could probably do a whole nother video on this, guys, but I would encourage you to go by trial and error and figure out what kind of finish you like. And by the way, I didn't show you the clock. You can buy these on Amazon. This one was about $12. I'll go ahead and wrap this video up, but I do want to say, if you guys made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I invite you to take part in this journey with me. I'm open to comments and your suggestions. Please subscribe so you can do so and help me be a better woodworker. And on that note, I can't leave here without telling you that if you can see something with some intention and practice behind creating a skill set, you can probably make it. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. Hey guys, I didn't forget, we still have to go over the side project. So check it out. This is more or less how I did this side project. Like most wood projects, it spent some time on the table saw. I sanded each coaster individually around the corners just to give it a handmade touch, but then also held them together and sanded them together to create some uniformity. It was really cool to give this project to a friend, to be able to put some time into something like this so that their whole family can have some enjoyment out of it. that's really what all of this is all about, is us creating and putting our efforts towards making people happy. Everybody always asks me about the rainbow. So the rainbow was actually put together in individual epoxy molds and then taken out early enough to where it was still pliable. I shaped it around a pop can and broke it off that pop can, put it in another coaster. So that's how those were made. The rainbow will always mean God's promise to me, and I promise you that if you continue to put intention behind what you do, you'll be successful in whatever you do. Thanks for hanging out today, guys. Thanks for watching this entire video. I will see you on the next one, and I look forward to seeing what you've made.
It's about the journey.